All right, let's jump straight into this deep dive. We're looking at Al-Andalus, that incredible period of Islamic rule in Iberia. We're talking centuries, 711 right through to 1492.
Yeah, and it's clear from the sources this wasn't just some outpost. It was a real center of civilization and deeply, deeply tied to Morocco.
Exactly. And that's our focus, isn't it? The sources really hammer home the role of the Amazigh people from Morocco.
Absolutely. Especially, this is fascinating, the intellectual side coming out of the Sioux region. So based just on these sources, we want to unpack why they were so vital. What was the impact?
Okay, let's start at the beginning, as the sources do. The conquest, 711 CE. What jumped out at me was the army itself.
Tariq ibn Ziyad's army, yeah.
Led by an Amazigh commander, and the sources say the fighters were, well, overwhelmingly Amazigh. Some say 20,000.
Others mention 12,000. The exact number varies, but the point is clear. Mostly Amazigh.
Right, and crucially, they settled. They weren't just invaders. They helped form the very first communities, shaping things right from the start.
And you see that presence later, too, like in the 9th century revolts mentioned in the sources. They were active participants, sometimes pushing back.
It wasn't just about soldiers, though. Fast forward past the Umayyad peak, Al-Andalus breaks up into those taifas around 1031.
And importantly, the sources show some of those taifas, like Granada under the Banu Ziri, were actually founded by Amazigh groups. So political power, too.
Which sets the stage for these huge interventions from Morocco, doesn't it? First up, the Almoravids. They dominated Al-Andalus from about 1086.
And their origin story in the sources is incredible, a religious reform movement, Sanhaja Amazigh.
Explicitly linked back to a scholar from Souss, Jaj ibn al-Alamti.
Yes. That connection between a Souss intellectual center and an empire is, well, it's striking. Their leader, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, crosses over.
Wins that famous Battle of Zelaka in 1086 against the Christians.
And unifies much of Al-Andalus. The sources are quite detailed on this period of Amazigh rule.
Then the cycle repeats, sort of. The Almohads arrive, another powerful Amazigh group, the Mazmuda this time.
Right, taking over around 1147, ruling till about 1269 in Al-Andalus. Ibn Tumart, Abdelmamin. Big names. They unify Morocco and Al-Andalus again.
Another major victory at Alarcos in 1195, though the sources also mark the turning point, the defeat at Las Navas de Tolosa in 1212.
Al-Lukab, yes. That weakened their hold significantly. But the sources often frame these interventions as almost necessary for the whole Western Islamic world's stability.
Even right at the end, the Nasrid Kingdom of Granada holding out from 1238 to 1492.
The sources show it leaning heavily on Morocco. Volunteer Amazigh soldiers, often backed by dynasties like the Banu Marin in Morocco, they were a vital part of Granada's defense.
But it's not just military force crossing the strait. Let's talk about Ilm Souss, the knowledge of Sioux. The sources paint a picture of this really vibrant intellectual scene in southern Morocco.
Established schools, scholarly families. Think back to Hajjaj ibn Zalou again. Died 1054. The sources say he studied in Al-Andalus in Cordoba.
And then founded his own influential school back in Morocco, in Akalo.
And that school trained Abdullah ibn Yassin, the founder of the Almoravids. It's such a direct link between Sioux scholarship and political power affecting Al-Andalus.
Incredible. And there are other examples, right? Like the grammarian.
Abu Musa Isa al-Jazuli, from Souss, taught in Almeria, Al-Andalus. His grammar book, the Al-Muqaddimah al-Jazuliya, was apparently quite influential there, direct knowledge transfer.
So you have this constant flow, military, political, intellectual, which naturally leads to cultural blending. The sources give example.
Architecture is a big one. You look at the Kutubiyya in Marrakesh and the Giralda in Seville, you see shared ideas, especially from those unified Almoravid and Almohad periods.
Music, too. Andalusi music, influenced by Moroccan traditions and musicians moving back and forth.
Yeah, and the exchange of scholars, texts, manuscripts being copied and preserved, customs traveling with migrants. It's a two-way street, really.
It makes sense why Amazigh heritage is seen as so key in modern Moroccan identity, given this history.
So putting it all together, the sources really compel us to see the history of Al-Andalus differently. You just can't understand it fully without centering the Moroccan Amazigh role, military, political, and intellectual, especially from places like Sioux.
Absolutely. And here's a final thought, something the sources seem to suggest. Even when rulers in Morocco and Al-Andalus were fighting, that cultural and intellectual exchange kept going.
It often did, yeah. It seems to have transcended the politics sometimes.
So what does that tell you, maybe, about how deep those cultural connections really run, how resilient they can be? Something to think about.